Welcome to Program Coordinators Make the Program Go Round. This is a CME presentation by the American Association of Colleges of Podiatric Medicine's Council of Teaching Hospitals. Today's presentation is by Dr. Andrew Meyer, who is Associate Professor at Temple University School of Podiatric Medicine and the Director of Temple's Podiatric Residency Program. Dr. Meyer is being joined by Diane Wysocki, who is a very experienced program coordinator for the Podiatric Residency Program at Crozier Chester Medical Center. She also serves as the Medical Center's CME coordinator.
All right, I think we're recording. My name's Andy Meyer, and I'm joined by Miss Diane Wysocki.
Hi, everybody.
We're here representing essentially the COTH, or Council on Teaching Hospitals, one of their educational events that we do on an annual basis. This particular lecture is a little bit more driven at residency coordinators, which we thought would be a unique spin as opposed to residency program directors. Although I think and I hope that residency directors, maybe particularly new residency directors, will get something out of it as well. My name's Andy Meyer. I wear a lot of hats, to be honest with you, although specifically I'm the program director at Temple University Hospital. And like I said, I'm joined by Miss Diane Wysocki, who's the program coordinator at Crozier Chester Medical Center. I have been a program director for 8 years at Temple Hospital, and I have been through 10 different residency coordinators, if you can believe it or not. So I couldn't bring my residency coordinator on to give this because they don't have the experience, but Miss Wysocki does have the experience.
So I did it for 11 years.
Yeah. She's been
at
involved
Hahnemann. Now I'm at
residency training for more than a decade at Hahnemann Hospital here in Philadelphia before it closed down, and now with my wife, actually, who's a program director at Crozier Chester Medical Center. So thank you, Diane, for helping out with this. And
thank you.
She's got a lot of good input, and we'll hopefully get some interaction with this as we go through the slides. So just in terms of an outline, again, we kind of wanted to make this more centered toward residency coordinators. And that could be a difficult thing, particularly if it's a big hospital that has a lot of allopathic and osteopathic residency programs, in addition to the podiatric ones. And so I have here coordinating a CPME program in an AACPM world. And for a lot of coordinators, they do have to kind of go back and forth between those two organizations. Our field, podiatric medicine and surgery, of course, has their own unique set of organizations that come with their own unique set of acronyms. So we're going to try and go through a lot of those acronyms and organizations to give an idea about what they do and maybe how they're synonymous, similar, or different to some of the allopathic and osteopathic ones. And then make it really practical. Some things that residency coordinators can do in order to really help out in the administration of the program, but also some things that they shouldn't do and to be aware of, responsibilities that really fall on the program director and not on the coordinator themselves. So our first organization that I thought that we would talk about is a really important one, and that is the CPME, and that stands for Council on Podiatric Medical Education. And we can see a picture of what the front of the website looks like here. And I've got two things highlighted. First off, there's a lot of general information that's found on this website as we'll go through. But then there is also some program-specific information on here as well. Anybody can log on to cpme.org and find a lot of information, but each program has their own unique username and password to sign into the portal. And this is one where not everybody has their own username and password. The program director will have one, and it's absolutely fine to share that username and password with the coordinator. A coordinator usually will not have their own username and password. It is possible for the hospital administrator too. So make sure you know what that username and password is. And once again, it's perfectly fine to share that back and forth between the program director and the coordinator. I would say that this is a fairly user-friendly website in order to try and navigate around. And it is certainly something that program coordinators should be familiar with. There's a lot of information. If you have a question about something, it is probably found on this website, even if it takes you a few clicks to find out exactly what it is that you're looking for and where you can find it. Most notable or most applicable certainly is underneath this tab on residencies for residency program coordinators, of course. And there are a lot of sub-tabs here down the side. Arguably the most important one is this sub-tab residency documents and forms. The most important is probably the CPME 320 document. And we can see here it's the standards and requirements for approval of podiatric medicine and surgery residencies. This is kind of the big document that says this is everything that residency programs should be providing to their residents, and this is everything that a program should be doing on an annual basis. It comes up a lot if your program has a site visit plan, because the site visit team is essentially going to be just going through this 320 document with your program. But I would certainly encourage all programs to be familiar with and open up this document all the time, not just when you have a site visit coming up. You should make sure that you're familiar with the document, make sure that you're familiar with the standards and requirements. I do have to give a little bit of a caveat here because there was actually just a recent multi-year process to update this 320 document. So you can see here that I've got, this is as of the most recent edition, April 2022. There is actually a new one, which is going to be implemented on July 1st, 2023. So both of those documents are available on the CPME website. So if you are looking through it, just make sure you're looking for the, that's my phone ringing awkwardly. Make sure you're looking at the correct document. And we are in a bit of a transition period here. This one, which implements July 1st, 2023, does not apply until July 1st, 2023. So when our next group of residents come in, but effective that date, there are going to be some changes that you want to be aware of, and that is the new document that everyone is going to be held to. There's going to be a lot of educational events about the relevant changes to the document. And there's a lot of information that will be coming out, and program directors will kind of get this specifically. Diane?
I just wanted to include in this document, I have printed it. It's like my Bible, and there's little flags all over the place that I have just to refer back to at least weekly.
Yeah.
Everything changes every day, not on the document in your programs. So it is like a little Bible.
Yeah, I keep a printed copy myself. We live in an electronic and PDF world, of course, but this is one to print out and have a hard copy of. I agree with that completely. A couple things that I'm not going to go through everything, certainly, but a couple things that can be a bit of a challenge with relative differences between the CPME and ACGME. It's not exactly the same. I work at a gigantic hospital, Temple University Hospital, where we've got hundreds and hundreds, over 500 residents. Most of them are held to ACGME standards. My 10 residents that are the podiatric residents aren't held to those ACGME standards. They're held to CPME standards. And so that can be a source of sometimes confusion and difficulty knowing which standards the residents are held to. So, for example, up until July 1st, the CPME actually does not require any duty hour restrictions. Now, most residents as hospital employees are held to duty hour restrictions by the ACGME, but the CPME actually did not say that residents were held to any duty hour restrictions whatsoever. It's not wrong for podiatric residents to be held to the ACGME standards, but there's nothing that's said in the CPME 320 that had to be the case. This will, effective July 1st, 2023, change, however, where essentially the podiatric residents and in the CPME document, it mirrors and mimics what the ACGME requirements are. But even with that said, there still are going to be some differences. If you work with any ACGME residents, you know that they keep very specific track of duty hours, and anytime there's a violation, it raises red flags and some bells and whistles go off. Sometimes even the ACGME will specifically have access to that and specifically ask a hospital's GME about duty hour violations. I would say that that is very unlikely to occur with the CPME. Duty hours are going to be checked when your program has a site visit, but the CPME is not planning to keep up with duty hours in between different site visits. So you should be recording your duty hours, but it may not still be to the same rigorous standards and all the bells and whistles that go along with the ACGME. The CPME also does not have milestones. There was a long discussion, actually, when the CPME 320 document was being revised about the inclusion of milestones. And for a bit, it seemed like milestones were going to be required in the new revision, but now it doesn't seem like that's the case. It's perfectly fine for your residency program to have milestones and to use milestones, but it is not a requirement like it is with the ACGME. Another difference, and I know about this honestly indirectly through when I attend GME meetings, I know the ACGME puts a lot of stock in these resident and faculty surveys that go out. And that is also something that might trigger an automatic site visit or a small review of a program, depending on answers to these resident and faculty surveys that take place. My residents take those surveys, but the ACGME doesn't get the results. Really, no one gets the results. We don't have that within the CPME. So again, it's perfectly fine for podiatric residents to have those surveys, but a lot of fellow residency directors and maybe fellow program coordinators really get stressed out about the results of those surveys. That's something that we don't necessarily have to be as stressed out about. And then the last thing here that's a little bit different that the CPME does not have is terminology with respect to, let me see if I can get this out of the way, terminology with respect to your faculty and different committees that take place. So for example, Temple says that I need to have a program evaluation committee made up of my program faculty. That's really coming from the ACGME. It is not coming from the CPME. The CPME does not require any specific committees of podiatric faculty and residents to take place. Now, the one small caveat with that is that the CPME does say that every program must undergo an annual self-assessment where you collect program faculty and you collect program residents to get together and do an annual self-assessment of the program. But it doesn't specify how many faculty need to be involved or how many residents need to be involved. So there is a self-assessment committee, I guess you would call it, although it doesn't have a specific terminology associated with it. But that's really the only thing in the CPME document that says what faculty need to have their involvement, other than, of course, naming one specific program director. Some things that the CPME does require that might be a little bit different than ACGME is, like we just mentioned, that annual program self-assessment. That's something that ACGME programs do as well. It's something that the CPME takes very seriously. Every year, there needs to be a meeting that takes place with the program director, program faculty, and residents where the program is assessed. And there's information on specifically what needs to be done in there. So that's certainly an area where program coordinators can help out, is to make sure that we get that meeting and get as many faculty to it as possible, get as many residents to it as possible, and have good documentation of that meeting. Who was there? Provide a sign-in sheet, provide minutes of the meeting, provide an agenda. These are the types of things that the CPME will be looking for.
Annually, you do this also.
Say again?
I know it says annually, but yes, you have to do it annually.
The CPME also does require, somewhat different than ACGME, in-training examinations. And the hospital is paying for these in-training examinations. Residents aren't paying for the in-training examinations. The podiatric world has two specialty boards, the ABFAS, which is the American Board of Foot and Ankle Surgery, and the ABPM, which is the American Board of Podiatric Medicine. Each of those boards offers in-training examinations to residents on an annual basis. The rules from the CPME say that once a year, a resident has to take one of those in-training examinations. You don't necessarily have to take both each year, but at least one examination each year of training, and at some point you have to take both of those examinations. So that's a bit different than ACGME, and again, a big difference is that the hospital is the one who is paying for it. And then just another topic that has come up recently, and I know is going to be a point of emphasis, and that's communication. The CPME requires communication between a program and the CPME with any substantive changes, and our camera here is blocking it, so I'll just move it to show that it's within 30 days. Anytime there's a big change with the program, it needs to be reported to the CPME within 30 days. There hadn't been very good communication, honestly, between some programs and the CPME in the past. So the CPME is really going to make that a point of emphasis going forward and sticking to that 30-day mark. And that, again, is certainly something that a program director can help out with in that communication between the program and the CPME. Another difference that directly affects program coordinators is that it always used to be that there had to be a, quote, designated administrative staff for the podiatric residency programs. But that had been relatively subjective. It is now objective as of July 1st, that it has to be the equivalent of at least 0.5 FTEs or full-time equivalents. So that is also something that all program coordinators and program directors need to be aware of effective July 1st, is that there is now an objective measure on that. There has to be a designated administrative staff from the sponsoring institution, and now that has to be at least 0.5 FTEs. So Dan, do you have, what's your FTE? Do you know offhand? Do you just do the podiatric program, or do you do other programs as well?
Well, here I just do the podiatric program, but in the past, yes, I had ACGME urology, and then I had podiatry.
Yeah.
So I would split it definitely right down the middle with the time, but now I have some more time to really focus on things.
That's great, yeah. So at Temple, we're split too. So we split with the pathology residency program. And then again, really some specifics from here that program coordinators can help out with. CPME does require a residency manual. Lots of times a hospital GME will have a manual for all the residents within a program, and will have specific policies for all the residents that are employed by that hospital. But you still need a specific podiatric medicine and surgery residency manual that's independent from the hospital. And I put in here specific, and I put in abbreviations picky. I know we're recording this, but even though it's recorded, I'll still deny it if any of my CPME friends ask me about it. It can be picky. There's a very specific list in the document that says these things need to be in the residency manual. And when a site visit takes place, the site visit team essentially works through a checklist to make sure that every single one of these things is in the residency manual. It does require standardized curriculum, and there is very specific wording on everything. Resident contracts, graduation certificates, affiliation agreements. Although sometimes you just get boilerplate contracts from the hospital, directors and coordinators really need to make sure that it is specific wording that the CPME requires. It can't just be a boilerplate certificate. It can't just be a boilerplate contract. There has to be very specific wording that takes place in there. I said at the beginning, Council on Podiatric Medical Education. You will get your residency certificate sent back if it says Council of Podiatric Medical Education.
Even that
versus
one word.
on. It is,
Yeah.
I'll nicely say specific, but I'll put in parentheses there that it is very picky with respect to this wording. Okay. The other area of the CPME, and this again is one of the organizations I wanted to focus on more, is the annual report, because this is also something where a residency coordinator can really help out the program director, making sure that this report is completed. This is called the 340 document. You report to the CPME on an annual basis if there's any changes to your program that you're anticipating, any changes to the affiliation agreements, either adding affiliated sites or decreasing affiliated sites, You will upload each graduation certificate. So this is something that's not checked just during a site visit. Every single year, the residency certificates must be uploaded, and they are checked for accuracy and according to the CPME guidelines. Annual fees. That's definitely an area where program coordinator can help out. Coordinating and facilitating and making sure that the annual fees are paid by the hospital to the CPME. And there's an electronic signature on here, and both the program director and the hospital DIO need to sign off on it. So I know that's something where I rely on my coordinator as well. I'll send a note, of course, to my DIO and say, the annual report has been completed. Will you please sign off on it? But I kind of rely on my program director to really twist their arm and make sure that it gets done in addition to my email. And this is usually done around September 1st of each year. I think this is our last CPME slide here before I switch over to the website. The CPME really is arguably the most important organization with respect to the administration of residency programs. So coordinators need to be intimately involved with the CPME. If there's any questions about your program, almost certainly the CPME is the one to go to get that information. They probably have it on their website, or they're the person to ask in that situation. Your program has an assigned CPME staff liaison. It's either Nancy or it's Bertus. These two are great. I had the fortune to work with them for the last couple of years on the residency review committee. If you have a question, they should be your first point of contact. And if you don't know who your liaison is, that's something that you should try and find out this week. Introduce yourself to them, send them an email, let them know who you are, let them know, and open that line of communication with respect to your coordinator.
And they definitely get back to you via email quickly. They do. You have a question, they get right back.
I'm going to try, pardon me if this is a little bit clumsy since we're doing it recorded, but I'm going to switch gears here and now just kind of show the website here. We had some still slides of it, but just to kind of give you an example. So if I'm a program coordinator, I'm probably spending most of my time under this tab of residencies, and I'm probably spending most of my time under this tab here, residency documents and forms. And we're not going to go through each of these, but there is a ton of information here. And again, I would venture to say that if you have a question about a program, a resident transferring in, a resident transferring out, adding a new affiliated site, which form should I use? Which report should I do? That information almost certainly can be found here. Another thing that's important, and that I would encourage everybody to do, is that there's also a list of approved residencies here. Your program is listed on this area, and you should know what it says. This is something that is heavily utilized by students. Students and your prospective applicants are 100% going to be looking at your program on this page. So you should make sure that it's accurate, and you should make sure that it's up to date. So I'm just going to jump to Pennsylvania, and we'll jump to my hospital here, Temple University Hospital. And I just want to make sure that all of this information is appropriate. It's got my name, it's got my phone number. If somebody wants to call and ask a question, you have your choice whether you want an email on here. It says what type of program I have, a PMSR with the added credential in rear foot and reconstructive ankle surgery. It says how many positions we have, and it even says when my next site visit has. It has the option, and I would strongly encourage you, all of you guys, to take advantage of this, of linking to your program's website. So that, again, students 100% check this out. You want to make sure students get as much information as they can about your program. Make that easy for them. Okay, so let's jump back. List of approved residencies, Pennsylvania. We'll go to Diane's program, Crozier, Chester Medical Center. And we've got all of their information that's intact here. Oh, you guys got a site visit coming up before mine, I see. And once again, we could jump right to where their website is. So if you're a program coordinator, at some point this week, check out this page, make sure the links are working appropriately, make sure you have a link to your website, and that information is all into play. Then if we just go back to our front page, although it stays up here, the other area that I mentioned was the CPME portal. So this is how you sign in specifically for your individual residency program. So I can click on the CPME portal. Of course, we're doing this in live time, so there's a bit of a lag. And again, this is something that can be shared. Your program can just have one username and password here. It's okay for you and the program director to both know what those are and to share them. So I tried to be slick here and print this out, my passwords, so that I would remember them. We can log in specifically to the CPME portal. Now, this is just Temple University Hospital specific. I can look back at all my old annual reports, and this is where I'm going to go upload my next annual report. So I'll click on it. Just to give you an idea, this is a bit of an intensive process. And again, an area where a program coordinator can help out a program director, making sure that this annual report gets completed accurately. Every single year, you've got to go in and input just some basic information about the program. Contacts, faxes, emails, how many residents, residency salaries, this type of thing. You're going to give them information about the residents who graduated from your program and upload their certificates. Don't just give your resident the certificate unless you make sure you've got a PDF copy of it, because it has to, first of all, you want to keep that for your records. Second of all, you will be uploading that every single year into this system. And then once again, it doesn't just get completed by the program director, it also has to be signed off by that DIO. So in my experience, at least, the program coordinator is the one who's going into the DIO's office, pulling up this exact website, getting to this point so that the DIO can give their electronic signature on it as well. All right, we will switch back to our slides. Here's what we just saw. Check out your program. Make sure the information is accurate within there. And then again, just because this is an important organization, I kind of tried to put a summary slide here of the types of things that residency coordinators can do with respect to the CPME to be really active involved. Be intimately familiar with the 320 and 330 documents. Don't just have a PDF, print out a copy and put a bunch of tags and highlights in it like Diane does.
You definitely use it. You really do.
Yeah. Particularly aware of the changes that are coming effective July 1st. It is a document that gets minor updates from time to time, but this was a major update which takes place about every 7 years or so. So things next year are going to be different than things that happened this year. So be familiar with those. You can help facilitate completion of and help get those fees associated with the annual report. Make sure you know how to navigate the website and log into the portal. Know who your CPME staff liaison is, Nancy or Bertus. Check and make sure you update your program's profile, and really appreciate the difference between the CPME and the ACGME. I would say don't just uniformly and blindly follow ACGME rules, requirements, and formats. Your hospital might require residents to do some ACGME things, but at the end of the day, the CPME is the administrative organization that monitors podiatric residents, and their rules and requirements are what they're going to be held to at the end. Okay, next set of, we'll go a little bit quicker here. Let's see if I can move this out of the way. Another organization that you might hear, an acronym, is the AACPM. This is also sometimes referred to as the AA, your program director might say. This is the American Association of Colleges of Podiatric Medicine. And it's the educational organization that represents these schools of podiatric medicine. Now, we are residency programs, of course, but we're going to be getting all of our residents from these schools. So it is important to understand what the AACPM does, and it really comes into play with getting students from the student level into residency programs with the match and everything like that. This is an educational organization representing 10 colleges of podiatric medicine in the US. And I kind of highlighted that a little bit because that is also something that has changed this year. Within the last 12 months, we have added 2 new colleges of podiatric medicine, one in Western Pennsylvania and one in Texas. Your program, make sure it doesn't get into a rut with respect to who you're recruiting and where you're going out to with respect to externship fairs and clerk fairs and things like that. I think a lot of programs kind of have a tendency to take most of their applicants from maybe one school or maybe a couple of schools, but we need to broaden our range here a little bit. If you are unaware of the 2 new schools of podiatric medicine, make sure your program gets aware of them, establishes a contact, and you're not missing out on a potential recruitment activity. With that said, the AACPM doesn't do a ton on a day-to-day level with residency programs like perhaps the CPME does. There's coordinations between the deans and faculty of all the colleges, which is good. They do some recruitment activities for the profession, and they do administratively manage several important services for residencies. That usually, though, goes under these acronyms. We have a tendency, I think, to think about these a bit independently and not being a part of the AACPM, although in fact, CASPR and CRIP are managed by the AACPM. CASPR and CRIP are 2 extremely important acronyms for program coordinators to be aware of, and this essentially is the residency interview and match process. So spelled out here, CASPR stands for Central Application Service for Podiatric Residencies, and CRIP specifically stands for Centralized Residency Interview Program. Honestly, I probably wouldn't have been able to give you the full names of those acronyms. Obviously, I know what CASPR and CRIP are, but I've just been using those acronyms for so long. The exact words of it, I'm not sure I would have been able to come up with. And I'm adding a new acronym in here too, because this is different this year. The match service used to be managed specifically within CASPR, and now it is managed by the National Match Service, or NMS. And so that's a different website, and that's a different username and password that your program director has dealt with just within the last 12 months. Each program has a unique page that it gets updated annually, and we're going to pull this up on the website. This is absolutely another one to make sure that you're aware of and make sure it's up to date. When students are trying to figure out where to do their clerkships at, they are going to this page to find out information about your program. So at least once a year, certainly on a regular basis, make sure that you're taking a look at that and that your program is up to date. Through CASPR, CRIP, and NMS is the scheduling of clerks. I put in parentheses externs here because that's just kind of the nomenclature that everybody uses. When I was a student, I guess they were called externships, and I was an extern. Now, it really should be called clerkships and clerks, but frankly, most of the people that I know still call them externships and clerks. So those names are kind of synonymous and go back and forth. Here's where we schedule the residency interview, where you can get all of your applicants' files from. It's where we put in the rankings and where the match results come out. I'm not sure at what point you guys are going to watch this video, but actually today, or rather tomorrow, is match day. Although today at 3 o'clock, both Diane and I will figure out who our residents are going to be for the next year. So it's an exciting time. Mm-hmm. Each program has their own unique username and password. And again, this is one that it's okay to share. You and the program director can have the same username and password for these spots. It's really a program-specific username and password, not an individual one. So if you don't know what those are, get it from your program director so that you can also kind of take a look in these sites and start to learn how to navigate it. This is also another program that's associated with annual fees. The annual fees are usually due in the middle of July, so that's something you can help facilitate, making sure that that gets paid by the hospital. One important thing within Casper is this form, it's not really a form, I guess. It's a piece of paper. It's a PDF that changes every year, and this is the schedule of dates. And just like Diane said that she prints out the 320 document, this is another thing that you should print out every year, and you should hang it up by your desk, because these dates have a tendency to sneak up on you, and these dates have a tendency to come and go, and these affect the match and your rankings and which residents you're going to have. So this is a hard and fast deadline that you absolutely don't want to miss. So print this out, put it at your desk. If you have the ability to put for your program director to have an electronic calendar where it pops up in their phone reminders with stuff, put these dates into their electronic calendar so that they know what deadlines are coming up, and you make sure that something doesn't get missed. I would completely miss some of these, if I'm being honest, if I didn't have it printed out, and it's literally sitting right here to my right here in my office. It's an extremely important form, and one that should be printed out and updated in electronic calendars on an annual basis.
I agree.
There is also within here, as I alluded to, your directory page. This is where you can input the information that goes to the directory. And again, students are checking this and checking this on a regular basis. So make sure this information is completely accurate. I'll go through that. And then here's an example of what it looks like in the National Match Service if you want to pull the application file for residents. So I blocked out the names of my applicants this year, although I guess that's not necessarily confidential information. So it might not be the easiest to appreciate, but this is a list of the different applicants. It has their name on here with a clickable link. And if you click on that link, it will pull up their application file with their transcripts, their letters of recommendation, their personal statements, their CVs, etc., etc. I know a lot of program coordinators will go into this and before the residency interview to make sure everybody has that information and is prepared. So you can get their application, you can print it out or organize it electronically and dispense it to everybody who participates in your residency interview. And then certainly after the match, you want to go in here and print out their application so that you have it for their file. If they're going to be your resident next year, you want to keep a PDF and a hard copy of their application.
Can I interrupt and say one thing?
Absolutely.
On that? Yeah. Especially after they do complete their residency, they may come back to you looking for their grades and things they never saved. I get that request a lot. Their transcripts from school.
Yeah.
Do we still have it? So yes, I keep a copy, hard copy, put it in their file.
Let's see if we can switch back. If we go to Casper Web, so this is what the Casper Crip looks like. I'm going to give you an information. So this is right on this front page here. It even says it here. Where here you will find the schedule of important dates. So you click on this, it gives you that PDF, and you can print it out. If I go up here to edit contact information, this is where I can input the specific information about my program that I want applicants to take a look at. And then if I click through reports, it'll take me to the directory and it'll show me what my directory page looks like. So when an applicant is looking at my program and trying to decide whether they want to spend a month as a clerk with us or they wanted to apply with us at the residency interview, this is kind of a first line of information of where students will go to. So this is honestly an important, it's not very glamorous. There's not a lot of color in here, obviously. It's kind of a boring directory. But for a lot of students, this is the first line information. And this is one of their important early decision points about whether they're going to apply to your program or not. So make sure some of it is just kind of standard information, but you do have the ability to write an overview about your program to kind of highlight some of the great things that your program and unique things that your program might offer. And then if I switch over to the National Match Service, and this has been unique this year. I do a couple of things with that National Match. I write a lot of the letters of recommendation since I'm a faculty at a school. I'm going to click on my hospital here, and here we can go to where our applicants are. And again, I'm not going to click on it just because it would show my specific applicants' names. But this is where you go, both in your applications and registered applicants, if you want to go get that file. You don't need to do a ton of clicks. It's pretty easy to download PDFs containing all of the applicants' information, including transcripts. So another really important organization here, Casper and Cripp, under the umbrella of the AACPM. What can program coordinators do? Print out and send frequent reminders to your program director about important dates and deadlines. Make sure your profile page is accurate, regularly updated, and appealing to applicants. Help facilitate annual dues each July. You can organize applicant files in preparation for the interview. Help put together an information packet about your program for the interview. During the interview, I don't know, do you go to interviews, Diane, with the team?
Well, I never did. And this year, Crozier did actually go. So Dr. Cornell went. I did organize her before they went with whoever they took, faculty and other residents. But next year, I do plan to go to help them more with just being there administratively, with the AV equipment, with the room, with hotels, dinners, whatever they need. Yes, I do think it's beneficial if we do have them prepared as I go with them.
And in terms of don'ts, I would say don't touch the actual rankings. That is something that a program coordinator should not do. It's something that your program director is likely going to stress about a lot, honestly. And I can tell you, it still happened to me this year. Just about once a year, like I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I'll be like, oh my gosh, did I actually remember to put in the rankings? And you got to certify the rankings. So maybe a program coordinator, particularly as the deadline is coming up, they can make sure that the rankings are in there, make sure that the rankings have been certified, give your program director a reminder that rankings lists are going to be finalized at this date and this time. But in terms of the actual rankings, that's something that a program coordinator should not touch themselves. All right, another quick one here, and that's actually why we're here today. COTH, or the COTH, is the Council of Teaching Hospitals. And the website here is www.cothweb.org. Essentially, this is an organization of podiatric residency program directors. So it's all program directors have representatives, and a lot of the program directors come together to talk about things that are going well, things that could be doing better globally and broadly with respect to residency education. So one of the hats I wear, for example, is I'm the COTH Region 7 representative. So that's all residency programs in Pennsylvania and Delaware. So if any of my program directors are having an issue, they contact me and I can bring it to this group. We meet in person twice a year. It is also where you can get some specific financial information about hospital reimbursements. And this is something that I know a lot of program directors have an interest in, is making sure that you're getting equivalent resources for your residents from your hospital's GME. If the internal medicine residents get something, the pod residents should get it as well. And sometimes, you know, a hospital GME might try and give you a little bit of a soft shoe, dance around financial stuff about the reimbursements that they're getting and things like that. This is publicly available information, and COTH provides that for your specific hospital. There are also annual dues here that are due around the beginning of May that you can help facilitate with. Just to switch gears again to show you, because a lot of people actually ask about this, that's financial information. So now I'm going to go to our COTH website, cothweb.org. I can log in members only. Here's my email address, and the page looks pretty similar, or now we're the same. If I scroll down here, I can see GME funding. I'm going to click on that. First off, this page, we're not going to go through it, but it gives you information about how GME programs are funded and how the money gets decided and dispensed and kind of things like that. So if you're not kind of familiar with the graduate medical education financials, familiarize yourself with it. So when you're talking with your DIO, you can go in prepared and make sure you have ammunition effectively when you're arguing to get resources for your residents. And then if we go here, there's two different links, teaching hospitals and non-teaching hospitals. And it's not just, although I logged in specifically for Temple Hospital, it's not just information here about Temple Hospital. I can see it for all teaching hospitals, but if I specifically search Temple, I can look at my specific financials by clicking on download here, exactly how much money my hospital gets for my residents. So again, that's something that I would argue that you should be familiar with and encourage you to be familiar with it. Here we are. It's not so bad switching back and forth. I figured this would be a little clumsy, but I think we're managing okay. The last big organization, and one where program coordinators can really be of benefit for a program director, is PRR, or Podiatry Residency Resource. We see here www.podiatryrr.com. This is one that's different than what I've talked about before, where there are unique logins. Your program director is going to have a login, and you as the program coordinator should have a login to this site. That's something that was added somewhat recently, giving program coordinators the ability to access PRR. If you don't have a username and password for PRR, that's something else that I would encourage you to do this week. Get a login for PRR, take advantage of what's in here, and really be helpful to the administration of your program. It is primarily for the logging of your residents' experiences. So when they log surgeries, when they log history and physical examinations, they're going to do it all through this site, but there's actually a lot in PRR that it can also be used for. It could be used to log duty hours, although I don't know a lot of programs that do. It can be used to log academic experiences. You can keep this as a sign-in sheet for your academic events, for example. Again, I don't know that a lot of programs do take advantage of that, but there really is a lot in PRR that can be done if you're familiar with it. PRR is also where you're going to schedule those in-training examinations, and it's also where you're going to officially graduate a resident. A resident really hasn't completed their training when you give them their certificate on June 30th. It's not really official until they have been graduated within PRR. There are annual fees associated with this, and they are usually due in June. If you don't have access as a program coordinator to PRR, this is how you get it. If you go up here to the contact us up at the beginning, they'll provide you with a phone number and an email, and they are all, just like the CPME is, Podiatry RR is actually very, very responsive. You're not going to wait 2 to 3 weeks to get a response. They're going to respond back to you right away with respect to it. You can send them an email directly and say, I'm the coordinator for program so-and-so, and I'd like access to PRR. Obviously, it'd be useful to CC your program director on that email so that they're aware of it and they can give their tacit approval for that. But you will get your own unique username and password for PRR. There's a lot that a program coordinator can do in PRR to help out with the program. We're going to go through kind of a couple of them. I've got some still slides and then we'll do it live. A program coordinator can add an attending into PRR. So every experience that the resident has, whether it's medical or surgical, it doesn't count unless there's an attending associated with it. So that's something that changes from time to time. Sometimes old faculty leave, and sometimes new faculty come in. I'll tell you that I have that personally at Temple Hospital all the time. Temple Hospital is gigantic. So when my residents are on their internal medicine service, for example, they might work with 150 different internal medicine faculty. So that's kind of a bit of a burden, honestly, to make sure that those faculty are constantly updated within the system. If there's no faculty associated with the procedure, it doesn't count. So you got to make sure that there's a faculty there. Thankfully, this is a very easy process. If I'm sitting in front of a computer, it takes about 60 seconds to add in a new faculty member. So my residents all know when they're doing their logs, if someone's not in there, I get a text or I get an email, and if I'm sitting by my computer, I can knock it out within 60 seconds. Coordinator, though, can also do this. So we're going to go from our main page here, go to the user list.
And Dr. Mayer, you'll get reminded from the residents if there's not an attending or if their name isn't even listed. You know, the PG ones that'll be coming in, they will text you and say, please add me to PRR, please. So all these different sites come together at one point. It's, you know what I'm saying though.
Yeah. A
new resident will say, please add me to PRR, and the doc I worked with. So they also help out, but you have to keep up with it.
Look up on user list, and then we'll be on here, and it's just very simply this add user button. And there's a lot of information that you can input in here, but it doesn't have to be done for a faculty member. For a faculty member, you just make sure that you designate them as faculty. The only information that needs to be applied in here is their first name, their last name, and their degree, whether they're a MD or a DO or a DPM. It is really pretty quick and easy to add it in. That if you've never done it before, maybe it seems like it would be this complicated process, but in fact, it's actually very, very simple in order to do that. Consequently, too, this is the way that your program director can provide you, a program coordinator, with access to the system. So if your program director goes in and adds you as a user, that's going to get you your username and password for PRR. The alternative, of course, is just to contact PRR directly and have them do it for you. Another thing that a coordinator might do is help clean up the user list. Because again, there's a lot of turnover for this. And a person might leave the program and still be on their list of faculty. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but it can add up really quickly. So I think in mine, I've got a couple hundred potential faculty members that my residents could log with. Now, they probably only actually work with 15 to 20% of that list, because the rest of it is older faculty who have moved on to a different job or retired or whatever. So it is possible to go in and delete a faculty member, although again, I would encourage you to make sure that that's something you don't necessarily do independently. I would check with a program director before you do it. We're going to do a couple PRRs, so I'll switch gears here and just show you those two things. Oops, timed me out. Here's our PRR site. Here's what the dashboard looks like, depending on whether you're a program coordinator, program director, or a resident. Your dashboard is probably going to look a little bit different, but the logs over here on the side are all generally speaking the same. We mentioned actually graduating residents. Here's where I could go into the system and graduate a resident. You see here, I've got 3 residents eligible for graduation. This is easy. User management, user list. I've got to move us. But if I move us, I just very simply can click on add someone in. If I designate them as a faculty, the only ones that I need to fill out in here are first name, last name, and what their degree is. It certainly doesn't hurt to add the rest of the information in, but that's all you need to do to get the person into the system. It's actually pretty quick. And then, yeah, if you scroll down here, it says that I have at Temple Hospital 257 available faculty members. But honestly, I don't know the overwhelming majority of these. Like, so for example, no disrespect to Dr. Albert Lewis here, but I don't know who Dr. Lewis is. Maybe he was an internal medicine doc that one of my residents worked with just one time. So if I wanted to, I can go in and delete him out of here to avoid any confusion and keep it really just to my core faculty. There's no real disadvantage, I guess, to keeping people in here in case they pop up again at some point, and the resident might work with them once or twice a year only, and that way you don't have to add them back in. But this list can get pretty long pretty quick, I think. Something else that a coordinator can do within PRR is checking on and printing in-training examination results. This is a good thing to print out and keep in your residence file. It's in theory always going to be available here in PRR, but you want it within your hospital's file on the resident as well. And in fact, starting next year, it's going to be a CPME requirement to really provide documentation that the program director has reviewed the in-training examination results with the resident. So you print it out, they can sit down, they can talk about it, and you can both sign the in-training results to document that that took place.
There is a section for them to sign too, sorry.
Yep.
At the bottom of that report, there is a section and a date after they review it.
So I go to reports here. I can go down to either my ABFAS or my ABPM in-training examination. We see it's abbreviated ITE here. Or I can just do it from this main menu. And I can go back for any resident who's taken in-training examination results. First, I'll click on the year. Then I will click on the my resident, and I run the report, and it'll kick me out a PDF that I can save to a file or that I can print. And here it is here. I can download it as an exam, Excel, or I can download it as a PDF. Once again, we'll switch gears. I did actually double check with one of my residents who graduated last year to make sure they were okay with me pulling up their report to show you. I'm going to go for my main menu, reports. I'm going to check on ABFAS in-training examination scores. I can get a report for one specific resident, or I can get a summary for the overall program. I'm going to click on individual report. Let's check last year's. And Sarah was nice enough to say that we could show hers. Give it a minute here, and we can get her results. See, we were very excited. She passed all 4 parts of the fall in-training examination. This is also nice. This isn't an ABFAS talk, but we get a little bit more specifics now in terms of what sections the residents might have done relatively well or relatively poor on. You used to just get a pass-fail. Now you can get a little bit more specific information about areas where you might want to tailor your curriculum if there's an area of consistent weakness. Something else a coordinator can do within PRR is, I'll say gently, but remind program directors about keeping track of residents' MAVs. MAVs are their numbers, when residents are always talking about their numbers. This is a minimum activity volume of things that residents have to see and experience before they can graduate. Program directors and residents are checking this site, or at least they should be checking this area of the site somewhat regularly, and it'll click out a PDF of a specific resident, and this is kind of what it looks for. These are all the required categories from the CPME. It says that a resident, for example here, digital surgery, it requires 72 procedures to be done. This was during COVID, I guess, when the numbers went down a little. This is usually a MAV of 80. We see this resident had 101, so they're 29 procedures over their minimum requirement. A resident absolutely cannot graduate until they have met all of their MAVs and all of their diversity requirements. A program director should be on a regular basis looking at this to make sure that residents are on track to hit their numbers, and to make sure that, like if you have 2 chief residents, make sure that they're about the same, that one doesn't have way more than another. And it's also something that should be discussed during the semi-annual evaluation. Print out the MAV report, talk with the resident, make sure they're on track, and you don't necessarily have any worries. But again, I would encourage program coordinators to also keep a peripheral look on this as well, because you can't graduate a resident unless they have met all of these requirements. It's grounds for a program to go on automatic probation, actually. If you graduate, give someone a certificate without meeting all these requirements. So particularly in the spring, take a look at your chief or senior level residents. Make sure that they have met all of these and that you're aware of it. Your program director should be, but again, it's not going to hurt for you as a program coordinator to also take a look and give your program director a gentle reminder if someone is off track or it doesn't look like they're on course. Make sure you have a plan in place for that. So that's kind of what I just said. A resident absolutely can't graduate without meeting all of these. And I would strongly recommend you keeping this in the resident's file. Print out a copy, save a PDF, and keep that with your resident well past graduation. You can also gently remind program directors about the CLAD report. The CLAD report, I would say as a program director, first of all, one of the most onerous jobs is making sure and keeping up with resident logs. Residents should be logging every single one of their experiences, not just a surgery, but all of their history and physical examinations, their consults, their wound care experiences, cast applications, all of those things. The program director's job is to make sure that those logs are accurate. So at least on a monthly basis, I review every single one of my residents' logs to make sure that there's not any errors in it. Those errors are usually unintentional, but the errors nonetheless are in there. The CLAD report is designed to help program directors and residents recognize potential errors. So if we go from our main page here, once again, I can go to reports. I can click on CLAD, or it's also available in this more menu here. I'm going to pick a specific resident and run a report for them, and that will tell me whether or not there's any potential errors that are in there. You can't actually graduate a resident if they have anything on that CLAD report. So it's critically important for your graduating residents, but it's also important for residents kind of along the way. If you don't keep up with this, the CLAD report can get really long in a hurry. So that's why I said that's a thing that a program coordinator can maybe keep an eye on. If you've got a resident that has 100 things in their CLAD report, maybe let your program director know, hey, you need to let's keep an eye on our CLAD report. It's getting pretty long for resident X.
Dr. Meyer, how often do you think a coordinator should go in and, every 3 months, every 6 months?
Couple times a year.
Okay.
So if I go to my PRR and I go to reports, I'm going to click on CLAD. I also did check with my resident here to make sure she was okay. Resident Kate for us, one of my chief residents, and we run her CLAD report. You can see that I've got 3 cases on here that might be a potential error. Everybody's going to have something. Just because it's on the CLAD report doesn't necessarily mean that it's an error, but it's something that should be checked and cleared. And again, a resident can't graduate unless this report is cleared. So what you don't want to get into is your program director, it's June of a graduating year, and they go to one of their graduating residents, and the CLAD report is several hundred procedures long that they've got to go through and try and figure out and try and fix their logs in order to graduate it. Just program directors likely are, but this is something the coordinator can kind of keep an eye on to make sure that the CLAD report is staying manageable. In the same way, program directors, again, have to check logs at least once a month. And most program directors, I would say, try and do it more frequently than that so that it doesn't turn into a gigantic job, right? So I've got 10 residents right now at Temple, and say each of those 10 residents logs 50 or 100 things over the last month. That means that when I sit down to do it, I got to go through 500 individual logs and make sure that they're accurate. So a lot of times you'll do it a little bit more frequently than that, and you want to make sure you don't get behind. You can, as a coordinator, kind of just keep track. Make sure that those logs are checked and verified on at least a monthly basis. I will say I do site visits for the CPME. That's something that a site visit team is always going to check. Is the program director actually verifying the logs on a monthly basis? It's a very easy thing to check, and honestly, it's kind of a very silly thing to get dinged on if you're a program director. You don't want the CPME saying you're not doing your job checking the logs. That should be an easy check mark for the site visit team to make sure that it's done. So we can go to clinical log, click on a specific resident, and there's a big long list of everything that they've ever done, and it'll give you the dates. It'll show you if it's been verified or if it hasn't been verified, and when it's been verified. It'll also show you when it was logged. So you can also kind of keep track about whether residents are also doing their logs on a regular basis. Just to show everybody that real quick. Switch back over. I'm on my main screen here, reports, clinical log. We'll use COTH since that was the example from the slides. And I'm going to run all of her logs, but I do have the ability to vary it. If I just want to look at her bunion procedures, if I just want to look at her biomechanicals, I can, or I can do it for all of them. And this is long. It's a long list, but what we're mostly paying attention to here is whether or not it's been verified and when it was verified, and also when the case was logged versus the case date. So I'll pick on COTH here a little bit. This case date was 7/7, but she didn't log it until 8/2. So a good 3 or 4 weeks went by before she logged it. So maybe I could encourage COTH to be a little bit more consistent with her logging. She logged it on the 2nd. I verified it on the 3rd. This makes me look good as a program director because the day after she logged it, I was able to verify it. And the system is actually pretty slick. If you click on the top of the category, it will rearrange the dates in order. So I can go in chronological order, or I can go in reverse order. And that's usually how we check to make sure program directors are verifying on a consistent basis. So if we look under our verify here, we see that I verified a bunch of COTH's logs on March 8th. All of these were verified on March 8th. All of these were verified on March 8th. All of these are verified on March 8th. And then we switch dates here. We go from 3/8 to 2/6. So the last time I had verified before 3/8 was on 2/6. So and I've got a bunch of logs that are verified on 2/6. So that makes me look good as a director if someone's checking. I verified those a month apart. I didn't go too long before that. Another thing that's possible, and this is a little bit variable, we actually, Diane and I had a little discussion about this ahead of time. You can use PRR to kind of indirectly keep track of where your residents are. So I know at a lot of sites, and Temple's certainly included in that, if a resident is not at Temple Hospital specifically, if they're at another location, if they're at a surgery center, for example, or they're at a rotation at an office, that is time that that resident is away from Temple Hospital, and that's going to affect the funding because the hospital is getting paid for residents being at Temple Hospital specifically. So just about all programs that I know of, their hospital wants them to keep track of time spent at the hospital and time spent away from the hospital. Now, PRR doesn't give you a way to directly do that, but you can indirectly make some calculations based on the clinical log summary. So it will divide up how many surgeries or how many experiences a resident had at Temple Hospital versus at Abington Hospital, for example. I can use PRR to do that, to figure out how many experiences are actually at the hospital or how many are away from the hospital. And we can use that in the report. It's also possible under reports for your residents to keep track of that directly using this activity log function. They can log specifically where they were on which specific day. And that can also be used to keep track of when residents were at the main sponsoring institution or away from it. The activity log, I think, is one of those things that is relatively underutilized, but it could be a potentially valuable resource for coordinators to help keep track of where residents are on what days and how much time they're spending. I'll say I don't do that at all as a director. My coordinator really handles that all primarily, but I know that they're under a lot of heat to make sure that that's accurate and that we're keeping track of where the residents are. It just gives us a little summary. So here, for example, that's the example I used. I could look up how many cases were done at Abington Hospital versus Temple Hospital versus Jeans Hospital. Every program's different in terms of how many affiliated sites they have, of course. Last thing here in PRR that you can do is take advantage of their training videos and resources. They really do go out of their way to provide a lot of training and information about how to specifically use their system. This is also something that is probably a bit underutilized. And if we go to our main menu here and click on User Manual, it will literally go through every single thing that it's possible to do within PRR. It'll give a list of written instructions about how to do it. And almost always, there's an accompanying video too. So if you don't feel that strong in using PRR, definitely take advantage of some of these resources, and it'll get you feeling strong right away.
Well, I just learned something. Our residents, we do manual timesheet logs. Now I'm going to start using PRR for this.
Yeah, you can. So we do. I'm pretty sure we do manual as well, but you can do it absolutely electronically in PRR.
Okay.
This I kind of just put in here as a joke, something you can do. Have a little patience with the system. I can't tell you how many times I've clicked on something and you just kind of get this spinning wheel because it takes a while. Again, residents might have 1,000 procedures that have been logged, and it just takes the system a little bit of time to pull them all up sometimes. So there's a lot that you can do within PRR, but there's also some things that you shouldn't do in PRR as a program coordinator. A program coordinator should never, ever, ever verify logs. That is the job of the program director. If a program director asks you to do that or is pressuring you to do that, you need to have a conversation, because that is solely the job of the program director. Then this is one where, again, everybody has their own username or password. This is not a username and password that you share. So I would say that you should never log in to PRR with the program director's username and password. You're just logging in with your own. You should never give a resident a certificate without meeting all of the MAV and diversity requirements, and we reviewed how to check that. And you should never give a resident a certificate if they have anything on their CLAD report, and we reviewed that. All right, my final slide here is just a couple more acronyms, because if you are not used to the podiatric world, these are almost certainly acronyms that you've heard, and just to have some familiarity with. Our profession really has two main kind of national political organizations. They are the APMA, or American Podiatric Medical Association, and ACFAS, which is the American College of Foot and Ankle Surgeons. It's likely that your program director is a member of these organizations, and it's also likely that your residents are members of these organizations. They both work pretty hard, actually, to try and recruit residents to be a part of it. ACFAS, for example, I know always gives out free membership to first-year residents. So that's the residency director fills out a form, verifies that they're a first-year resident in order to bring that in. This also speaks to fellowship status. So, you know, all doctors have weird and different acronyms behind their names. So you've probably noticed these letters behind names, AACFAS and FACFAS. This means whether they're an associate or a fellow of the college. And a lot of people, once you become board certified through the ABFAS, you can be a fellow of the ACFAS. It's confusing, which is why I'm putting it on the slides. This shouldn't really be confused with the two national boards. I mentioned these two earlier. These are the two specialty boards. So if you want to get board certified, these are the groups that put on the in-training examinations, and these are board certification that'll take place after the resident graduates. We have two of those within our field that are recognized. ABFAS is the American Board of Foot and Ankle Surgery. That's the surgical board. And there's ABPM, the American Board of Podiatric Medicine. That is the medicine board associated with the profession. To even make it more confusing, sometimes you might even see ABPS, which is the American Board of Podiatric Surgery. That's what ABFAS used to be called. It used to be the ABPS, and a couple years ago they switched names to ABFAS. So kind of just for completion's sake, they don't necessarily have anything directly to do with resident education and training, except for the in-training examinations, but almost certainly acronyms that you're going to hear as a coordinator and that you're going to be hearing about from your residents. So, all right, so this is always honestly a little bit goofy without a live audience, so we can't, this is usually the time in a presentation where I'd stop and ask questions. With that said, I've got my email on the next slide. Feel free to reach out with any questions. I'm certainly happy to do that. I also, like I said at the beginning, this was a relatively unique webinar that COTH has put together because it was primarily directed at coordinators as opposed to directors. If program directors liked it, if program coordinators liked it, please let COTH know. We're definitely happy to put on more similar events like this. Just brainstorming some ideas here. I mean, I personally think it would be better if we were doing this live to allow for questions from program coordinators. We can do a talk on assessment forms, tips and tricks, how coordinators can be helpful during a site visit, program maintenance, what types of things should coordinators be keeping in a file versus which types of things can they dump. And then again, if we're really doing it toward coordinators, dumb stuff program directors and residents do, troubleshooting common mistakes and things like that. So with that, I thank you very much for your virtual attention. I certainly thank Diane for her contribution.